Welcome to Charged Up Creations. I'm Trevor, and today I'll be showing you how to paint text on a t-shirt using an airbrush and also some traditional paintbrushes. Let's go. So for my setup today, I have this background panel. It's nice and firm, and then I have my t-shirt clipped on the side here, and I have a cardboard insert on the back of it just so that any paint doesn't seep onto the front of the shirt. And I also have some paper towels laid down here just in case I have a spill from my airbrush or my paint, it doesn't get on the bottom of the shirt. So of course you can paint on a t-shirt freehand with an airbrush or a paintbrush to whatever design you want, but for today's project I'm going to be using a stencil that I made, and I'll be showing you how I did that right now. Stay tuned.
So when you're creating your stencil, you want to go to DIYlettering.com. There's a bunch of ways how to make stencils, but this is the way I prefer. You can type in your text here, and then go over to pick a font, and then compare fonts with your text, and it'll actually show your font, or your text rather, with a bunch of different fonts. And you can just choose the one you want. I chose Celestial Antica, and then you want to screenshot your laptop or computer. So on my Windows, it's the Windows button and print screen at the upper right hand corner. And once you save your picture, you want to pull up Word and import your photo into Word. Click on your photo, go to picture format, crop, and you want to just crop that border off. This will help with the resizing of your stencil. And then we'll do it on the top. And you want to get it pretty much as close as you can. It's not a huge deal. And then you want to click on the photo again in picture format again. And then go over to the length. And I'm going with 9 inches for my template or stencil. And then you can put it in the middle of the page. Click just before the picture. Hit enter a couple times just to center it in the page. And then you hit File, Print. And there you go. So once you got your stencil all printed out, all you gotta do is grab a X-Acto blade and a glass cutting board and go to town. So once you got your stencil all cut out and ready to go, we're going to take a little bit of contact adhesive and we're going to spray the back of it and kind of use one of the paper towels to pat it down a little bit, and that will be able to stick the stencil right to the shirt. So you don't want to go too crazy with this, just enough to kind of stick it down. And this stuff is a little thick, so we have to take a paper towel, just kind of dab it off a little bit just to get some of the saturation off. And then you just want to line it up and place it on your shirt wherever you want it. And then we'll pat it into place. And there you go. There's the main stencil stuck down. And then of course you have your 2 little pieces here that you saved. Put them down in a little paper towel here. And give them a quick little spray. And then pat them down. That way they can go in place. Line them up where you want it. And there you go. There's the stencil down. So the first technique we're going to be using is with the airbrush. So I already have some airbrush paint already pre-mixed. You can buy it like this in the bottle. This is black. And then I have my little hopper here to load up. And before I put it into the hopper, I have these paint filters, and this will just help filter out any chunks of paint that's either dried up or got into the bottle. Probably one of the biggest issues about airbrushing is if the paint's not completely clear of any debris or chunks, it gets clogged up really, really easily. So we're just gonna put a fair amount of paint in there, and then we'll be good to go. So once you got your paint all loaded up in the hopper and ready to go, I got my paint set to about 20 to 30 psi. That's for the compressor. So I'm just going to go ahead and start lightly painting it. You can practice right here and see the paint flow and kind of get a feel for the airbrush. You don't want too much air pressure now because it'll make the stencil kind of shoot up, and you don't want that. You want nice crisp lines. So we're going to go ahead and kind of from a little far away, just go ahead and shade in the template here. And it doesn't have to be perfect the first pass. We're just lightly shading it at first and letting it dry. It's kind of that base layer that almost primes the t-shirt. So I'm kind of about 6 inches away, lightly pulling back on the trigger and just kind of getting a feel for the airbrush. And there you go, there's the first layer done. Now the next layers, or the layer, I'm going to be putting down some pretty heavy amounts of paint. So I want to tape up the edges just so I don't get any overspray and kind of ruin the shirt. So I'm just going to tape this up real quick, and then it should be alright for the next couple of layers. And that's all you need to do. Here I'm moving on with the next layer. There's the second layer done. I went a little bit thicker this time, and I'll probably do 1 or 2 more coats just to make sure it has nice even coverage, and then you just peel off the stencil and you'll be done. So here we are, going in with the third coat. Again, we're going to go a little bit heavier this time. So the trick here is to keep the airbrush as perpendicular as possible, just so you don't start spraying at an angle and getting paint underneath the stencil. But other than that, the third layer is done and the coverage looks really, really solid. So I'm pretty much happy with that. And I'll give it a minute to dry, and then we'll peel off the stencil and see what we got. So here we are taking off the stencil. I'm just going to start from the top here and try not to pull away the paper. It helps if you have kind of a lower tack tape, like this masking tape, because we want to try to reuse this stencil for the second t-shirt. So as you can see, it pulls up really nicely with the contact adhesive. Might get a little too tacky by the letters, but that's what you kind of want to get a nice clean edge. So as you can see, there's just a little bit of overspray from the letters. That's just because the stencil wasn't stuck down completely. And as you can see, the paint's not as dry. It's a little cold right now. So I touched it and unfortunately got a little smudge here and there. But it kind of works for the overall theme of the shirt. The beauty about airbrushing is if you get overspray from the template and you don't like it, you can always add to it. So I'm going to just put a little bit of design work. I'm going to put some line that kind of fades down, and I'll probably shoot some red spatter over it to kind of give it that grungy kind of look. I mean, it is a Haunt t-shirt after all. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So as you can see, I just used a piece of paper to kind of mask off the lettering, and I just kind of did like a shadowing effect, and I lightly sprayed the background with the black from like an angle, and it gave it a nice kind of shadowing effect. And I forgot that I had this fold or crease at the top of the t-shirt, so I just kind of picked it up and taped it off, because that would create a nice hard edge, which would look kind of weird on this t-shirt. So if you're happy with this, by all means, you can stop here. But I want to go a little bit further and add some red spattering to kind of give it like a blood effect. I have a product called Permablood, and it's pretty much like permanent paint. As you can tell, on hard surfaces it dries to like a glossy finish and it looks like real blood. On fabric it doesn't really have the same effect, but it'll still look pretty cool. Now you're definitely going to want to be using gloves when using this product because it will stain your skin. So I have a chip brush over here and I cut the bristles down so they're a lot firmer. So when you put the paint on it, you're going to flick it like this and you'll be able to create a pretty cool effect. So I just kind of stick the brush in there and get a little bit on it. Being careful not to spill it. So you can kind of put it on nice and thick like that. And then you just go ahead and start flicking it onto the t-shirt wherever you want it. And obviously the more paint you have on there, the bigger the speckles will be. You can load up that brush and kind of just let it drip onto the surface like that to get a couple drips. You can even load it up even more so and just kind of fling it onto the surface too, like so. And it'll kind of give that cool spatter effect as well. Before I get too crazy, I'm just going to leave it as is and let that dry. You can even hit it with a hair dryer and help it dry even quicker. But you definitely don't want to go too crazy with the blood splatter, and then it'll just look way too messy. But I'm pretty happy with that. Alright, so now we got a black shirt. It's going to be the same process, but obviously we'll be using white as our paint choice. So obviously you can make a new one if you're comfortable doing so. I'm going to try to reuse this one. It's just printer paper. I probably should have used some photo paper because it's thicker, almost like cardstock, and it would have held up a lot better. And you can also get tighter edges with a thicker paper and when you glue it down better. But we're just going to stick with the same one. I'm not too critical about making perfect clean lines. So we're just going to go ahead and glue this on, same as last time. So once you got your stencil glued back down to your shirt, we're going to go ahead and grab some paint. Again, I have airbrush paint and it's thinned down and it makes it really nice for painting. There is fabric paint medium that you can get and mix it with acrylic paint to make your own base. But I just like using this stuff because it's also acrylic, but also sticks really well. So the trick to this here, I'm just going to use a foam brush applicator for this. And I'm going to put a little paint onto the foam brush. And what you want to do is kind of move it around the paintbrush, but you also want to dab out most of it. And you're going to want to just kind of lightly tap it. They do make foam daubers for this process. And it might not be as clean as an airbrush, but it is possible to do it this way. So all you have to do is you want to keep it as flat as possible and kind of lightly tap the surface. And you'll slowly start to push down color onto the shirt. And you can reload it whenever you feel like you're not putting down enough paint. But again, you're going to have to do this in layers just like the airbrush anyways. So don't be afraid to go too light. We're running out of paint there, so we're going to load it up again. And it's just about that much of paint. And then I'm kind of wiping off most of it and getting a good base. So I sped up the process with a hair dryer and made sure it was nice and dry. So then we can go in and do our second coat. You can continue to keep doing layers like that with the sponge brush and just keep on blotting away and building up color that way. Personally, I'm going to take this template off and I'm going to hand paint it and see if we get a difference. So here's a clean and simple version of what a traditional brush can do with a little bit of paint. I mean, you can just leave it as that. I'm probably going to play around with it a little bit more to kind of enhance the text on there. But other than that, that's pretty much it for that. Just set it real good with the hair dryer and you're pretty much set to go.
Alright guys, so there it is. I played around with it a little bit more. I added black around the lettering just a little bit to clean up some of the edges and to pop the white. I did a little bit of white splattering around the text, and then I also used a little bit more of the blood splatter like the first t-shirt, and I think it came out pretty good for just a brush and some paint. So here we got the two shirts side by side. This one is the airbrushed one, and this one over here is with the paintbrush. Both are two different styles. Both can be appreciated. It's up to the artist what kind of style they want. But I think they both came out really, really nice. As always, the links to all the products that I used in this video will be linked down below. If you guys enjoyed this content, make sure you hit that like button. And that little red button right down there, that's for the subscribe button. Make sure you hit that if you want to see more awesome content from me, Trevor, from Charged Up Creations. That's all for today, and I'll see you guys on the next one.